It is such a privilege to be able to talk with you about this beautiful book. I got it a couple of weeks ago and I couldn't put it down. It's not only just physically beautiful, but you are truly a triple threat. Stage, screen, and writing is so hard, I know, having written 2 books. And I guess I wanted to start, before we start talking about your mother, I want to start talking about your father, since he was a necessary part of the equation. And there is a picture, so you can see Marcia's family.
And my mother's pregnant with the 5th one.
Okay, that was my question.
There's 5 kids, and my mom is pregnant right now with the 5th one.
Ah, what a great picture. Set the stage for us about how this lovely family came to be, maybe first by telling us about
Well,
Captain.
sure. So my father is a naval officer, or was a naval officer. He passed in 2002. And my mother was she's still alive, she's 81, a beautiful, demure Dallas bride. She was the kind who wore pearls even in the daytime. And I describe her, she wore a slip even with her blue jean skirt. And you're like, Ma, the whole point of a blue jean skirt is you don't have to wear a slip with it. And she liked her slip with her blue jean skirt. And in this picture, it's my oldest sister, Leslie, my second sister, Cheryl, me, my brother, Thaddeus, and in my mother's tummy is Stephanie. And we're getting ready to see my father off to sea. He would leave for 6 months at a time. And Mom, pretty much, you can see we're all in a close age group range. And she pretty much brought us up as a single mother while my father was off at sea and coming home. And she was the captain of the home while he was the captain at sea. Now, you said you want to talk about my dad, and it's interesting because someone recently talked and said, why isn't your dad in the book more? And I'll tell you why, because my father would have upstaged the entire book on some level. So his favorite word, he's a Navy man, his favorite words were goddamn son of a bitch, and that's who he was, He was the guy who would say to me, Marcia Gay, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and you'd be like, I don't even know what that is, Dad, I wear high heels, but do it anyway. So he was such a boisterous and loud and big person, in many ways like me, more boisterous, more commanding, more walk into a room and we're going to let you know we're here, very direct, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, very funny. But behind every person like that is a person like my mom, who is the foundation, who we wouldn't be where we were but for their support. And they're quieter, they're more demure, they stand back, they don't want to take center stage. So I knew as soon as I started writing the book that when I would write about my dad, there he was, center stage. And I do, in the epilogue, I even tell a story where my dad is, he's listening to opera. And I have a date who's come over to the house. I'm young, I'm just early high school. And my date's come over. And my father, get in here! He comes in and we sit down and on the couch, and my dad's listening to this opera, and he's sitting back with his brandy, and he makes us listen to the opera. So we're like listening to the opera, horrified, and we're waiting for my mother to save us, but she's loading the dishwasher, and my father leans forth and he says to my date, now this is about love and pleasure. And my date slid down the couch as far away from me as he could slide. Is terrified, my father. And we go on and we listen to the opera, and Dad swirls his brandy. And when it's all, and then he's leaning back and he's singing it and he's crying with it and he's singing La Traviata. He loves it so much. And then he stands up and he says, that's the best goddamn aria I've ever heard. And, no one's really ever said those 3 words together before. I think they literally don't go together. But that was my dad. And when he is so, I write so that you know him immediately.
Yes.
But then he needs to take a second seat so that Mom and what she did and what her rhythms were and the more quiet music could take center stage, because the book is about her. It chronicles her seasons, it chronicles her beauty, and it chronicles that demure, more quiet beauty that she had.
And what a contrast, not just in their personalities, but for her to have been charged with having this family while this very commanding person was off at sea. It's an incredible juxtaposition. And let's talk a little bit about when she was 31 and you moved off to Japan, because it's just a mind-blowing thing, the image of all of you on the plane and going off to this foreign land. And your mother, you say that that's where she really started to emerge after, at that point, they'd been married 11 years?
Well, we
got married
had
in
we had
college.
all the kids, so I guess we were pretty much stair steps. So they had all of us for maybe about 11 years. Yep, she got married at 19, and she was in her very early 30s. And there's each chapter is called My Mother Is A. So chapter 1 is My Mother is a brightly ribboned maypole. Chapter 2 is My Mother is a crescent moon. And each chapter, it just happened that was the way I wanted to word each chapter. So the crescent moon, My Mother's a crescent moon, starts when we leave. Imagine one tip of the moon firmly planted in America, and we leave and we're flying across the ocean across the Atlantic toward the Pacific to Japan. And so my mother becomes that crescent moon. And not only is the moon touching both sides of the earth, really, my mother is holding her brood in the same way, and she's looking out the window at the moon, and the moon is shifting, shaping, and I say the moon beckoned to Mom to change along with her, and Mom did. And she became this woman in Japan where she wore more sort of beautiful silks, and we had a Japanese seamstress, and we didn't have a lot of money. If you're a military family, you don't have a lot of money. Even if you're an officer, it doesn't matter. You don't have a lot of money. But we did have enough. She had a seamstress, and she was now an officer's wife, and she took Ikebana, and that was the big thing that changed her. My mother would be going to teach Japanese in a school. She didn't speak any Japanese, and she went to teach English in this Japanese school, and they didn't speak any English, and I don't know how she did it. And she would drive. She didn't, she couldn't read Japanese, so I don't know how she did it, but she did it. And this is where you go. There's a fierceness, there's a tenacity behind this woman that doesn't look like commanding a ship at sea, but girl is commanding a Volvo through the Japanese streets and driving on the different side of the road, and she did it. And she befriended this Japanese teacher, a science teacher, who introduced us to their family. And there's a festival that chapter ends with called the Bonadori. And I had always thought it was a harvest festival, but in fact it's the kids singing because they're in school and they want to get out of school so they can go out in the rain. It's pouring down rain. They want to go out in the rain and hoe the rice so they can get out of classes in school. And they have this beautiful festival in August. And we went to this festival where we all had yukatas had been made for us, all 5 of us, and there's Navy men and there's starched whites and there's Japanese people and everyone's in yukatas, and it's just a sensation of sights and sounds and beautiful, beautiful music. And we danced around and around and around, and that's where I learned this song, Ame Ame Huda Huda, which I sing it all the time.
Would you sing a little bit?
I'll sing a little bit. Like literally, if we're at a campfire and someone goes, everyone's singing, I'm like, oh, I know one. If we're at a talent show and my kids have to do something, I'm like, guys, I know one. The kid's like, Mom, no, not Ame Ame. I'm like, no, Ame Ame, it's really good. And it goes like this. So there was this dance. Can I stand up and do that? So there was this dance, and we're in this circle of people, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people going around this little temple they erected in the middle of the pavement of the hill wherever we were, and everyone is singing, and I kind of got lost in this trance and just was with all these Japanese people singing this song, and I was sure I was going to get in trouble, and I was sure I was going to get a spanking, but I couldn't pull myself away from this moment. And this is how the song goes. So I'm hoeing rice, and it goes like this. It goes, Ame ame huda huda kasanga, Yano mene homu kaya huda shina, Pichi pichi kapu kapu na na na, Ame ame, and you go on and you sing it again and again. And at the end, thank you. I'm telling you, your campfire will never be the same. I'll give lessons in the back if you like. So at the end of that chapter, it's just so lovely. I was sure I was going to get in trouble, and my mom and the science teacher, I'm giving the ending away, but you'll like the writing. My mom and the science teacher found me, and they pretended like I'd been with them the whole time, and they danced a little ame ame with me, and I never got in trouble for it. But it was really about being free. And so a lot of the chapters in this story have, not like the moral to that story is, but it's kind of that one was about being free. And the book is so much about loss. It's about freedom. It's about growing up. It's about finding your own voice. It's about friendship with your mother. And that particular chapter was when my mom saw, oh, she's happy to immerse herself and be free with all these people, which is great.
Well, one of the things I love about your writing and the way you've told the story and how it unfolds is that you get this palpable sense of your father, this commanding person, and your mother evolving. And Japan, what do you think it was about Japan that allowed her to flower, if you will? I mean,
She was left alone.
she had to. She
That's
had
part
to.
of it. I think when we're immersed in another culture, number one, I think it's such an eye-opener.
Yes.
And very quickly we learned that America's not the only game in town. And even the most basic things as the way people went to the bathroom, I mean, that's the bottom level basic thing,
Right.
was completely different from the way we went to the bathroom. They had benjo ditches. You had to put your feet on the little things to go to the bathroom. And the sewage at that time ran raw in the street. Now you can sit on a toilet that gives you a little massage. So it's completely different. But like even those things, the food was different. Mom, she didn't allow us to judge it. She just wanted us to immerse ourselves in the culture. And then the second thing is, I think she learned an art. And Ikebana isn't just dumping a bunch of flowers in a vase and kind of shoving them into some form. It is an art, and it comes down from the Buddhist monks, and it's based in the concepts of a triangle, which all art is a triangle, even storytelling, beginning, middle, and end. And when you take an art history class, they show you the great art from the Greeks to the Romans on. There's triangle in there. So this is an asymmetrical triangle. And there are 3 lines to the Ikebana art. The top line, imagine a great big pine branch. The top one is called Shin, that means heaven. Then imagine another pine branch here, about 2/3 of it, that's called Soi, that means earth. And then the bottom one, imagine a great big peony down on the bottom. That is Hikai, and that means man. So heaven, earth, and man, there's a spiritual element to it. But it's an art, and whenever you immerse yourself into an art, something explosive happens in your head, in your creativity, in the way you see the world, in what you expect from yourself, in how you connect to other human beings, and how you connect, in this case, to nature. So I think that's as much it. I think, if you paint or if you do pottery, like whatever you do, you're suddenly doing something that exponentially makes you bigger than you were before.
And it was something that was hers while she was raising you in this
Yep.
alien land. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Although I love the story you tell about how flowers were essential in your life even before she discovered Ikebana, because the May Day story.
Right. Does anybody do May Day in this room?
I'd never heard of it before.
Does anybody even know May Day? Oh, I think one person in the 2, great, 3. Oh, there
There
were
are
May
people,
Dayers.
yeah.
Because we did that growing up. And that was, I don't know if it's maybe not, but you see like our cute little dresses and our cute little shoes. We were in like the matching clothes time, right? That was a different time than we live now. And so we would make these little doilies, we put flowers in them, and we would go to the neighbors' houses, and you would get the stuff from the yard, or if you were really on a splurge, we'd buy from Ralph's grocery store, because we grew up down in Garden Grove for a couple of years. I moved every 2 years, every 3 years, but for a while we were in Garden Grove. So then you go to the neighbor's house, and this is what the whole point of it is. You go to the neighbor's house, you hang it on the door, you ring the doorbell, and then you hide, but not too far away, because you have to be near enough so you can hear them go, "Oh, how gorgeous. Who could have done this?" And you're hysterically laughing because it's you, and they know it's you. And we used to do, when I lived in Harlem for a while, and we would do the same thing in Harlem, and the old timers understood it. And it's not a front porch, it's a stoop in Harlem, and we would leave them. They go, who done left this little bunch of pretty bouquet of flowers right here? And we'd be like, so it was something that was about loving your neighbor, about doing a little sweet spring festival, but about community. And I think it's harder these days because community is so few and far between, right? Like lots of people don't even know who's in their neighborhood.
Right.
Maybe you know one person next door. And so it's a way of connecting community as well. We did know who was in our neighborhood, our cul-de-sac as kids, but even now in my little neighborhood, I know a couple people on the street, and when you do something like that, they're like, okay, we're bonded on some level.
There's a level of naughtiness to it too that I love, and there is in your mother also, like in a very demure way.
Right.
Mischievous is probably the word.
Yes, mischievous.
More than
yes.
naughty. So to jump around a little bit more, and just because you sang for us and you did it beautifully, your
Another
mother.
song, perhaps?
Yes, these people are here for a show. You obviously, your mother is such a huge influence, and the reflection you have is so pointed and detailed. But there's one story there was no way you could ever forget, which is how she pushed you to go on an audition that
Right.
pretty much set the course of your life.
That's
And it had to
true.
do with singing or not singing.
Yes.
So I think that that's a good indicator, too, of
Good
your
story.
mother's tenacity.
Well, I'll
uh,
tell you that story. So, but it starts with mothers. I mean, with the idea of Mother's Day on some level. Well, yesterday, because I can tell you, I would not be where I am if it weren't for my mother. And I think a lot of us would say the same thing. We wouldn't be where we were if it weren't for our mother's belief in us, for their pushing us to do things. My mother always said, "Do the thing that you're afraid of doing, honey." And I think my mom said that, but my mom said that, go out and challenge yourself, do the thing you're afraid of doing. So I had been working, I'd graduated from University of Texas, and then I went to Washington, D.C., and I lived with my parents, and then I lived on my own. And in DC, I started working at a place called the Gaslight Club, where I was a gaslight girl. And so I had to serve cocktails. We wore little Playboy bunny meets gun-smoking kitty outfits. Mine was blue velvet. You had to wear like a little choker. You had to have really clean hair and pretty makeup, high heels and fishnets, and serve cocktails. And you had to sing. And I'm not a great singer. I'd had no training also at the time. And I used to always sing the song that I could just hit the notes at, but I sing it really tidy. And when I would listen to Ella or somebody sing it, they sing it like, wah. So you might know this song. It's, you had to go to the piano and wait, and okay, here we go. I'm going to sit right down and write myself a letter. But see, when I go, letter, the real singers go, letter, and bang. I mean, they just go on and on like, I can't do this. I'm better. Let's get off the note and move on. Whatever. So once there were some billionaires sitting in the cocktail area. I had served them, and they gave me $100 bill not to sing. So, needless to say, I was full of tears in the locker room, and wished I could sing R-E-S-P-E-C-T. But that weekend, I went down to visit my parents, and they knew that I was really living in D.C., trying to be an actor and reading papers to go to auditions. And my mom, over breakfast, pulled out a newspaper, and she said, "Look, honey, there's a play that you should audition for. It's at the Little Theater of Old Town Alexandria, and it's called I Ought to Be in Pictures." And I was like, "Mom, that's a musical. It's not a play." She goes, "No, no, no. It says right here. It's Neil Simon. It's a play. I think you should audition for it." And I'm like, "No, Mom, it's a musical. I'm not going to audition for it. I can't sing." So, of course, I thought I knew so much more. And she insisted, "No, dear. Why do you think it's funny?" She said, "Well, honey, if it is a musical, just don't sing." I'm like, "Mom, just leave. Would that be okay?" So we call. It's not a musical. It's a play. I auditioned for the play. I got the part. I got really good reviews in the part, and I won an award for the part. And so I took all those reviews and I put them on a brag sheet. And then every subsequent audition I went on anywhere, every casting director I met, everybody, I showed that brag sheet. It was like my entree. And I collected all the good reviews. There it is. That's me. And then when I went to New York, I showed that brag sheet to people. And eventually, I got to audition for another thing. And it's funny how it just trickles. It's not like a very clear trajectory, but I can go back to that moment of, and it is such a validation, which brings me in some weird way to Alzheimer's, but it is such a validation because when someone else tells you something about you that's good, you believe it. You want to believe it, and other people believe it. Oh my God, this critic said I was okay, so this person's going to give me a chance just because this person gave me a chance and liked it. And it's so interesting how those are the things that we validate ourselves not only through other people's eyes, through our own eyes, but also through other people's eyes.
Of course, right. Now, did you remember that story until you started writing this book, or is it something that we all have, those of us who are fortunate to have lived a certain length of time, have these memories that are buried that emerge, and this book is chock full of them. But that one in particular, is that something that was always present for you? Have you discussed it with your mother before?
On and off. It's not. I never forgot it. Like, there's just moments you never forget. I never forgot that. I never forgot calling them to say I got Miller's Crossing, and just being so, like, falling to my knees in gratitude. I never forgot when I called them to tell them that, that I'd been nominated for an Oscar, and my mother going, "Oh, I already know. The Garden Club told me," and my dad saying, "Fan-fucking-tastic." I'm like, okay. They were polar opposites, really. So you never forget those things, and they fill you. So that story I didn't forget. There were stories that suddenly when I was writing, I would go, "Oh, God, I remember Mom telling me about that." Like the one, the bamboo. Even a woman with 5 children can be lonely, and Mom watching the bamboo grow. That I'd forgotten about, and somehow it wove its way back into that moment in the book.
So you've said that this is your way of remembering for your mother because she can't
Right.
any longer, and that's such a beautiful and poignant statement. We should just probably sit and unpack that for a while, but we can't. So, when you started writing this book, you intended initially to write a book with your mother about flowers.
Right.
And then let's talk a little bit about how that was sort of the beginning of the recognition that there was an issue for her.
Well, that's a really interesting question, because I think this happens to a lot of us. We have a plan, we have a desire, we have a goal, and we it's a little outside the box, and we're hopeful for that goal. We're going to do it. And in the year 2000, a lot of people had new goals. No better time to start new goals in a new century. So we were ready, and Mom, we were on a plane going to Venice, and Pollock was going to the Biennale, and Mom, sitting in first class like a queen, up the seat, down the seat, massage the seat, whatever, said to me, "Come over," and she said, "I want to do a show that we'll sell to HGTV, and we'll call it The Flower Path, and I'll visit people's gardens, like some of your friends, Bette Midler maybe, and your girlfriend Cameron Manheim maybe, and we'll go visit these people." And I said, "Absolutely." And then she'll do a flower arrangement. And I said, "Great." And she was waiting for me to tell her it was a stupid idea, because she's my mom, and who'd want to see her, and my friends would never let her do this at their house. And I was like, "I think it's a great idea, Mom." So we started planning this flower show, and we shot the pilot at my house in upstate New York on this beautiful lake. And you could see Mom down in the canoe. She'd go down to the canoe in the morning. We'd get footage of her enjoying nature, and that was going to be our first show. And like at one point, she even heard a beaver fart down in the beaver dam. We're like, fortunate for editing, but it was like just this really beautiful time, and we were full of hope. And we thought, we'll make a calendar book. January, flowers, chrysanthemums, and I'll do a memory blurb, and you'll do the how-to and then turn the page. February, roses, memory blurb, turn the page. March, jonquils, like that. And we were struck by a tragedy. My brother's children passed away in a fire, and his ex-wife too. And life stopped for all of us. It was the tragedy of my life, and everything got put on a shelf. And that's why I say people, I bet, in this room have similar experiences where you're going along, you think you know, and something pulls the plug and you go, "Oh," and you never get back to it. So our focus was my brother and his healing, which I'm so happy to say he has healed, and he's been an incredibly noble example of that for all of us. He has a new family, and he moved on. My mother then got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And then in the middle of all that, I got divorced. I was in the process of getting divorced, so my marriage was crumbling. And I got pissed, which is a really great motivator. I just got mad, mostly mad at watching her disintegrate. And in the middle of all these crumbling things, I was mad at watching her lose her ability to validate her life, because I think of memory as a companion. When we're old, we're supposed to be able to go, "Yes, this is me, and yes, that is my child, and yes, this is the certificate I got from teaching, and yes, I did lead a good life, and I was a good person, or maybe I wasn't a good person, but anyway, this is the life that I led, and these are the kids that love me, and the grandkids, whatever." We're supposed to have this memory as a companion that validates our lives. And she didn't have it. So she would only understand her life through us telling her, "Mom, you used to do blah, blah, blah." "Oh, that's lovely. She didn't have the memory of it, the validation of it. So I said, we're going to write that damn book, Come Hell or High Water. And she said, great. And then I went back to California to start writing it, and I didn't know what to do. I'm not a writer. And I had this neighbor named Alvin Sargent,
Yes.
whom you guys might know from Ordinary People or Paper Moon or Julia. Amazing writer. He was in his mid-80s. I had a tremendous crush on him. And he had just lost his wife, Laura Ziskin, to cancer, and I just was in the middle of a divorce. And I said to him proudly one day, Alvin, I'm writing a book about my mother, because he's a writer. And he goes, what have you written? And I said, well, January is a time for new beginnings. And he said, what else? I said, no, that's it, because it's a calendar book, and that's the beginning, January, you get it? January is a time for new beginnings. He's like, okay. So go home and write for 20 minutes, he says to me. So I said, okay. I went home and I wrote for 20 minutes, and I came back and I gave him what is now the beginning of the 3rd chapter. And he said, okay, so you can write. Now go home and write for 20 minutes more. But he'd given me a compliment, you see. So the vanity, I was like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like hours later, I came back with a chapter. And it began to morph into something that was not a how-to book. It began to morph into what it is now. It was not my mother's flower show. And it made me sad to do this book that was not with my mother. I would have memories with her. I would read to her, but she had lost by then so much of her memory that she couldn't really say, oh, no, remember this moment happened then. So I looked at old scrapbooks. I looked at old letters. I looked at old checkbooks even of hers to kind of remember what was going on during the time of the years, and then wrote a lot of it from memory, and some of it is just imagination. Like she didn't really talk to the moon, of course. She wasn't really flying in the sky above Central Park, but I write that.
And you dedicated the book to Alvin Sargent, so he obviously had much more than a just instant role. He was pervasive throughout.
He's a dear friend. I just saw him on the book tour in Seattle, and I went out with him. He's 91 now. And he was so proud to see his name in the book. And he's won like 3 Oscars, but I think he's as happy about this because he's happy to shove someone like this and say, look what you did, look what you did.
It's so interesting to me how you can write a book about basically the loss of your mother's faculty. And it's beautiful and happy and it's upbeat. This is not a downbeat book. Not that there would be anything wrong if it was, because we do need, as we were talking backstage, to speak honestly about age and
Right.
disease and our declines. But how did you achieve that tone of celebration and elegy? Especially since you are a writer. I mean, you are a writer. You have a book. You wrote a great book. But people like me can't. I mean, it's just so hard. How is it that you struck that tone? Was there a totem in your life?
It's a great Alvin, maybe, because I was writing a little bit more carefully, and he said, take the cap off, which is why I made that comment earlier about art. When you're actually doing art, you take the cap off. With Ikebana, you have to take the cap off. With acting, you have to take the top off so that you can exist up here in a place that you didn't even know. And with writing, it was the same. I was very tidy. I mean, with singing, it's the same way. I don't know how to take the cap off singing. I don't have the skill. But with writing, he said, take the cap off and just whatever you write, let it be. You'll edit later, and the editor's your best friend. So that's what I did. And then I would surprise myself where mom would be flying, we'd be flying, and it was perfectly fine because it was more lyrical, it was more imagination. And I guess I think so metaphorically, I think that's what ended up coming across in the book. I think, like I call Alzheimer's a thief, and it's a indiscriminate thief, and it's a frigging cowardly thief, because if any of us in this room has it, if we're going to show it in 20 years, we have it now. So the signs, it is in our body, living in our body, and then the symptoms show later. It knows the lock on every door, on every block in the world, and it's indiscriminate as to whose it will open. And so it's very, very, very scary. But in terms of the writing, I think that helped me And also, I would read to people. I have friends in the audience that I would read to. I would sit and I would read to them ad nauseum. And if it didn't fall off the tongue in the right way, then I would go, okay, it's not interesting. It's because as an actor, I have to hear how it sounds in the room. So the alliteration, the wordplay, the circles, that's what makes sense to me.
But your goal in writing it was it mostly, it feels like you're right. I'm reading your diary when I'm reading this, or you wrote it for your family, not in a amateurish way, but it feels that personal.
It's so funny because people always say your memoir is so personal. I think, aren't they supposed to be personal? What is it if it's not personal?
The only ones who get published are, yeah.
But then I read other ones and I think, that you can be careful with a memoir. And I didn't know how to be careful, so I wasn't careful. And there was a time when I stopped writing. I was doing Code Black, and it was about 8 chapters in, and now the hard stuff was coming up. And it was the divorce, it was my mother, it was talking about things that were really hard to talk about.
Yeah.
And I just stopped writing for a year and a half. I just couldn't do it. And then I thought, you have to write the way you act. It has to be authentic. You have to have the ugly stuff. You have to have the bumps. You have to have, I don't cry pretty. When I cry, it's snot. And it's red, and it's not pretty. And sometimes I'm like, cut, can somebody get that? Can help us out. But that's just how I am. It's raw. So now I realize that I've written some things that were pretty raw in there, that were maybe exposing. Like there's one part when I'm talking about the divorce, and I wasn't the girl who was, and I've seen women, and I admire them that they can do this. They'll be like, well, one door closed and another door opened. I was like, no, it didn't. It hit me in the head and knocked me on the ground. And I was not heaving. And, it was really, really hard for me to show myself as that needy and show myself as, on some level weak. But then I think more people relate to that than they do that strength. I think we relate to each other's weaknesses and humanity, and that to me is the beauty of humanity. We're always struggling to be better. We're always struggling to move past our fears and move past our self-recrimination, our insecurities, all of that, to be better. And so that's what I write about is some of that struggle. And my mother was right there. Here she had Alzheimer's, and I was cuddling up into her crawl space of her body to have her comfort me. And she did, as she does, she did.
But the goal was to celebrate her, wasn't to educate, or ultimately, for me, I found it very educational about not just your family and this personal insight, but learning more about how your mother has descended into this darkness of this disease.
I don't think that was the goal initially. You're right. I think the goal was to validate her life by saying, this is what we did, these were the journeys we went on, this is who my mother was. And then the stories, which has become fun to tell. The New Zealand story just became really fun to tell at the time when I'm pregnant and Mom and I are in a Ralph's grocery store, and I'm a condominium. There was nothing Hollywood pregnancy about me. I had 7 chins, and to this day, I say if you have 1 chin, then you're not really pregnant, and that's all there is to it. And we were in Ralph's grocery store buying flowers because Mom was going to teach a flower class to all my girlfriends. And
since you're delayed in
I was 2 weeks overdue, and we buy all these flowers. Mom's teaching me about all the flowers, and we're going to teach a class to my friends in Venice Beach. And we go to the condiment aisle, and there's a lady, and all the people, they always want to touch your stomach and bless you. And they say, oh, God bless you. May I? I said, yes, you may. And she touched my stomach. God bless this little baby. And is it a boy or girl? I said, well, it's a girl. She goes, oh, may she come under the Lord Jesus Christ. And this little girl, and then she goes, now do you have stretch marks? You're going to have stretch marks. She's so big. I said, well, I don't have stretch marks yet. She goes, well, when I was a girl, I said, I have to rub olive oil on my belly. She goes, when I was a girl, the doctor told me, don't rub olive oil on your belly. You got to oil your vagina. My mother was apoplectic because my mother's a good Dallas girl. And we were so stunned we didn't answer her. So she was sure we didn't quite understand what she was saying. So she said it louder. At which point we were still so stunned. She was quite sure we maybe didn't even know where the vagina was. So she began to demonstrate the oiling of our vaginas for a little while until my mother picked up a bottle and she went, extra, extra virgin, perhaps? And I was like, Mom, nailed it, Someone said they have a mother who has Alzheimer's, and she also loves puns. I think you're in the house. I won't, yes, I didn't want to call you out. And my mother's quite like her mother. She loves puns. She loves wordplay. She's witty. She's funny. She's proper, but she's not above a good oil your vagina joke. So, right? and those just came out. Those were just adventures with me and my mom, and I didn't want them to be lost, and I wanted my kids to know. I wanted them to know who this incredibly beautiful woman was.
I felt like I was right there in the Ralphs when you told
yeah.
that story. What is the status of your mother right now?
I don't even know the stage. It could be stage 5, 6, 7. I don't know. She is 81. She has forgotten the function of many things, like a spoon. Maybe we'll relearn them in a day. She's in the moment, I will say. She cannot remember the past. She can't imagine the future. She's in the moment. We bring flowers to her. I know one sister goes down and visits her a lot. She lives in Texas and Austin, and so she visits her a lot, and they have dinner together. They do flower arranging together, and she's an incredible comfort. And she has home care. My mother has home care that is not the kids, and a lot of the Alzheimer's Association says it shouldn't be the kids because you give up your life for a parent, and then you've given up your life for them, and that's obviously, not good. But some people can't afford not to, which is why this is just this disease is the crime of the century. It really is. The numbers are astounding. The lack of the same kind of financial research is astounding. We in this room have to make a clarion call for Alzheimer's research because no one survives it. People survive cancer. People survive and live with AIDS. No one survives Alzheimer's. It's a death sentence, and it's very scary and sad. And people will say to me, well, say something positive. And I think, I can't make a lot of lemonade from these lemons. I can tell you about my mother's essence, her spirit, and the fact of the beauty inside of her. But right now, I don't really want to. I will because it's true. But what I really want to say is that we have to take our cue from the AIDS community, which they were the ones suffering it, so they were the ones who showed us how to galvanize around it. Right. We have to take our cue from the cancer community. Women came together, and they said no effing more, and they came together to get rid of it. Well, the Alzheimer's patient loses their voice. So they don't have the voice. They can't band together. Lots of times they forget how to walk. Their bodies are forgetting the functions. And by the way, I know this is the scary part, but it is true. Every 60 some odd seconds, someone comes down with Alzheimer's. Every 60 some odd seconds, and in the next 30 years, it's going to be every 30 some odd seconds. And while there's one drug, I think we just visited the Lou Ruvo Center in Las Vegas, and they talked about this drug that sort of sounds like abracadabra. That's not what it is, but that's what it sounds like. And it can cause stasis for Alzheimer's, but it still doesn't. We still don't know the cause. And we still don't know the cure. And this drug we haven't really tested yet. So it's, like I said, it's a clarion call, and we do have to galvanize around it to make people aware of it. And we were talking about this earlier. People are afraid to talk about it because it's not sexy. There's nothing sexy about it. You're old if you get it, usually. We don't talk about that. We don't remember that we're getting old. It doesn't look good, and nobody wants it, so people don't talk about it. So that's one of the reasons I also ended up pushing through the ugly parts, because I thought we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it. It makes me really angry. And my mother always would say, repurpose your pain towards something positive. So I'm angry, and I want to repurpose that toward something positive in the book. And I'm going to go speak to the Senate and testify to the Aging Committee about why we can't cut funds for research. It would be devastating to America.
So, to honor your mother, you've become an activist.
Yes.
It's a beautiful...
And in New York, I was an activist on some level anyway, because you can't live in New York and sort of not be. So I was a gay rights activist, LGBTQ, I did Ageless in America. Once I won $1 million for Make-A-Wish Foundation, like the Dream Foundation is the adult version, by figuring out I had to test everyone, which was the correct glass of wine, 50 glasses, which was the correct glass of wine, and I guessed it, and I won $1 million for this company. So I had done activism work. Bring me a bottle of wine, and I'm an activist for anybody.
That's great.
Right? So, but this disease makes me want to dedicate so much time and energy and money and just not stop. I was more an activist by invitation, and now I'm an activist by necessity and hearing the call.
That's where most of us become,
Yeah.
most passionate. Larry King asked you on his show about this test, and your you talk very frankly about your children being concerned, your 3 children being concerned. Is what happened to Grandma going to happen to you? Can you talk a little bit about this test and your willingness to find out where you're at with the disease yourself?
This starts in Hawaii. Every Easter, I would take my kids to Hawaii, and we would surf, and it became my sort of post-divorce tradition. I would take the kids there, and there's one Easter I'm just feeling really depressed. There was 1,000 things going on, and I was just depressed, and it was because of my mom, and I also felt really guilty because I wanted to go to Hawaii for vacation, and I didn't want to go there. I wanted to take my kids to Hawaii, and they were all begging me to take them to Hawaii. And please, Mom, we have to. You can visit Nani after, which I did. So I took them to Hawaii. And we went down the beach on Easter morning for an Easter service. And we got our Starbucks, and we walk all the way down the beach. And there's this really sort of boring where we passed these like hippies playing music on the beach and singing and getting ready to baptize someone. But I'd had it planned, and I'm a woman of my plan, that we were going to go down to that hotel and sit on that beach. And so we did that. We got down there, and it was like boring. And my describing the music was too high and too white and too like, and it just wasn't speaking to any of us. So we walked back down the beach because the kids were just imploring me in their looks, like, Mom, do you really think God is here? And I'm thinking, I'm not feeling it either. So we go back down the beach to the Hawaiian group, and they're playing music, and suddenly they take one girl and they dunk her in her white, and they take another, and we join them in having their Kool-Aid or whatever. And as we leave, Julita says to me, she's my daughter, my youngest daughter, she was 7 at the time, she says, Mommy, do you believe in Jesus? And I didn't want to lead the witness, so I said, what do you think? She said, do you think Jesus is real? I said, what do you think? And she said, well, in our hearts. And I said, I think so too. And then she said, well, why do you think he made Nani get Alzheimer's? And I said, well, I don't know, Julita, I don't know. And she said, well, Mom, and now her voice gets higher, do you think he's going to make you get it? And I said, well, I don't know. And then I realized this chapter is called My Mother is a White Easter Bunny in a Confectioner's Egg. Those little eggs with the Easter Bunny inside of them. And I knew Julita wanted me to be a little Easter bunny, safe in a little confectioner's egg. And I said, well, Gita, I'm going to fight really, really hard so I never get it, because I never want to forget you. And then her voice goes way up high and thin and reedy. And she says, Mom, do you think he's going to make me get it? And that was her biggest fear, that she would get it. And so I said, I hope not. And I couldn't even answer her other than to say, no, absolutely not. You will not get it. And we went out and we swam in the waves, all the kids, we swam in the waves. And it was like our own, baptism, so to speak, in a way that ended up being this refreshing thing. But it is their biggest fear that they would get it. And so we talk about it a lot. And it destroys families. Death destroys families anyway, as we know. Families fight over shit you wouldn't believe when somebody dies in the family. So Alzheimer's, it does as much because you have different opinions. You're going to have different opinions about how to care for the person who's still alive. And it's very hard because they're alive. So now you're making decisions for them. And so I think that early testing window is a really, really important window because you can take charge of your own destiny to a degree, from saying, this is who's executor, medical, durable power, medical power of attorney. You can say all those things. 2, you can say, if I get it, I've researched these 15 different homes. And at a certain point, this is where I want you to put me. And you are free to put me there. You do not have to give up your jobs to take care of me. I have the money, whatever it would be, to make sure you have the correct insurances, to just make sure that the ducks are in a row. Because if you don't, They have to. And it's a hard, hard thing. So I said I want to know because I want to let my kids know. So I did the 23andMe. And have people done the 23andMe in the room? So I did the 23andMe for the gene, and I don't have the gene, but that doesn't mean anything. You could still get it and not have the gene. And then the next step is to do the brain scan. And so when I was at the Luruvo Center, I said, I want to do the brain scan. And the doctor said, you're too young. And he's really, I'm too young for something? Well, so lovely. Apparently.
Say that again,
And I was like, doctor. Apparently, you have to be 65 to be a part of a clinical trial at that place. But you can pay for it. They're just expensive. But I would like to do it for many reasons. Number one, because now I'm an advocate. I'm a public person. I want to put my money where my mouth is. And if I have it, if I have this stuff that says I have, we'll get it. Then it'll be really interesting to participate at this young age for them to see how long before it shows a sign, what kind of things one can do to keep it away, and to, again, free my kids to not, have to give up their lives or lose their finances or whatever. For my family, we're in in somewhat of a financial state that we can help my mom. We have a lot of hands-on care. Another sister, I think I forgot to mention, she goes down and she does art with my mother, so we can have care. There's a lot of families that don't have any savings,
Right.
and they don't have insurance, and the kids end up giving up. Usually the woman. And very often women in their 50s are divorced anyway, so they give up their job. No, but I mean, I don't mean to paint such a dull picture, but I'm like, the women it's going to affect are women in their 50s who are caring for their parents and caring for their kids, and it's a real issue. It's a financial
Absolutely.
issue. And so that's why I would do the testing, and I've met some amazing people who are living with it, who are talking about it. But then there's all this kind of research right now that's linking the mind and the gut, and there's a lot of talk about, they call it diabetes 3, which is inflammation of the brain, which means cut out sugar and, unfortunately, maybe even wine. When you exercise, that you have to sweat. That's the bad news, is you got to sweat. Because I like exercise. When I have a treadmill and it shows like a little picture on the front, like I'll be like, oh, I was walking in New Zealand today on the beach, and then they're like, you need to walk in the Alps, okay, honey, on the incline like that, because you have to sweat. But that's good for the brain. And I think about this book that I read years ago that I loved so much. It was by a guy named John Medina, and he wrote something called Brain Rules, and it's about the 12 different things you can do that will help your brain or hurt your brain. And one of the first things he talked about, and they talk about this in the Alzheimer's community right now, is movement. And the human being, the anthropological human being, we learned to think on the move. So we have 50,000 plus years of body training, anthropological training, where we're on the move. We're walking 12 miles a day, and we're carrying stuff. And we're not eating sugar, we're eating bark. We're eating some meat and vegetables and fruit, but not a lot of sugar. So that's 50,000 some odd years of body training compared to the last 200 of a lot of sugar in the diet, compared to the last really 40 to 50 of sugar being pervasive, and compared to the last 20 of very little movement, because we do this all the time. So this is me, armchair psychology. This is not, nobody at Luruvo said, Marcia Gay, join the team. But that's me thinking, because I'd read that book a long time ago, that it kind of makes sense that it feels almost epidemic right now.
Yes. Ted's asking us to open to questions, so if you can get your questions ready, but I want you to tell us one story, because clinically this is proven that music is helpful for people with Alzheimer's. Can you talk about, since we're in this building built by Herb Alpert, there's an interesting coincidence that Herb Alpert's music factors in to an interaction with your mother that was particularly poignant.
Do you guys remember that Herb Alpert album called Whipped Cream? Oh my gosh.
It probably helped pay for this building.
Literally the sexiest woman you've ever seen in your life is sitting like so, and her gown is made of whipped cream. And then she has a big gardenia in her hair of whipped cream. And no matter who you are, all you want to do is lick that whipped cream right off her body, like literally. And so I was a kid, and this comes in the May Day chapter because I was talking about sort of the virginal purity of the May Day flora and fauna tradition. And then my dad was going off to sea. And so the night before he'd go off to sea, we would get to have Taco Bell. And then he would play, we'd bring the Taco Bell home, and they'd put on this great Mexican music, and we would all run around the house dancing. And they would put on Herb Albert's whipped cream album, and then later they put on Wes Montgomery tequila. And so we would all be dancing around, waving our napkins like maypole things, dancing and singing tequila, tequila, da 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 tequila, and we would hide in the closet and burst out on tequila, and hide in the back room and do little dances, tequila, and Mom and Dad would just laugh and watch it. And then the next day he would go off to sea, and we wouldn't see him for 6 months at a time, but we had this beautiful memory. And then years later, what she's talking about is I visit Mom in Texas. And I have these little Bose speakers, and I put on the song Tequila because they say it elicits memory in Alzheimer's patients. And sure enough, I put it on, and Mom is astonished at the Bose speakers, even though I've explained them to her 10 times before. But the good news is she's always astonished anew and happy anew. And when I'm playing it, right before Tequila comes, she whispers, Tequila. So she kind of, something happened and she remembered it. And it makes me feel great to know that she can make those connections. They say it's all about familiarity. I will say this one thing. The essence of my mother has remained the same. Sometimes with Alzheimer's, people become very aggressive or lascivious or unrecognizable. My mother's recognizable. She's a demure, beautiful Dallas lady. Her essence is soft and beautiful. She's kind. She recognizes beauty. She will say, fill your heads with beautiful thoughts. That's good for the brain. And one of the very last moments in the book, in fact, I'm calling her because I'm terrified that I'm going to leave something out, and now the book's going to be done, and what if there's a big revelation that she has to tell me, and I say, Mom, whatever you're thinking about, we're FaceTiming, whatever you think about, tell me. If you're thinking about love or flowers or sex or gardening or food or God or whatever you think about, tell me. And she says, God. I said, oh, you're thinking about God? And she goes, we weren't really a super religious family. And she says, yes. And I said, what about God? And she says, love. Love. It happens to everybody. The better the thoughts, the better the thinking. And that is her way of saying, fill your head with beautiful thoughts and love, and that is good for the brain. And science has proven that it is good for the brain. Anxiety and anger and hatred and all of that is not good for the brain. So that's a little gift from my mother.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, out there?
So we have time for some questions. Just a reminder, at Live Talks LA, questions typically start with a W or an H, sometimes a D. They are generally short. We do not believe in two-part questions, and only Lisa gets to ask follow-up questions.
Hi. Sorry, I was just taking all that in. Thank you. Is it all right to ask a question about your work as an actor?
Absolutely.
Because I'm an actor and I've always looked to your work. And I just coincidentally yesterday watched Pollock again. And then I was thinking back to Angels in America. And those, I know in myself, and this is a question asked with the gift of hindsight, looking back at those two pivotal, important, clearly career important, but it's more than that. Can you speak to ways in which you developed that helped those things to appear, that helped you to meet those creative challenges when they arose? Do you know what I mean? I never feel like that's a complete accident.
Well, I think I went to school. First of all, I was a student at NYU. So I had gone to the University of Texas. I'd lived in Greece, and I studied theater there. I lived in Germany. I decided maybe I could do theater. Then I went to the University of Texas, and I was terrible. I had no craft. I just had a love of it. So I learned a little craft. Then I waited 9,480 tables and worked at the Gaslight Club. And then I went to New York. And in New York, I began to feel that everybody knew something I didn't know, that they had a level of skill and craft that I didn't know. And I auditioned for NYU, and I got in on a scholarship from Zelda Fichandler. And one of the things that they kept saying to me is, "You're enough." And that was absolutely antithetical to what I thought. I thought I was not enough. I thought I had to have wigs and masks and, anything but me. Who would be interested in me? It was really quite self-flagellating on some level, which many actors are. We're not enough. We've got to be somebody else. And if we could just be somebody else, that would be interesting. So I'm enough, yes, they're telling me, but also I have to have craft to access the part of me that's enough in another character. So I think for me, what you're talking about is craft that somebody gave me. The school taught me how to do that. So let's just say, and then there's maybe luck of life and circumstances, because I will tell you, when I was auditioning for Angels in America, I had just broken up with someone who was a born-again Christian, maybe gay, I'm not sure. So my character in Angels is dating a Mormon who's gay, and so I wasn't feeling like I needed drugs. I was feeling furious. That's what I was feeling, and that's what I brought to the audition, was kind of raw pain, fury, and that's what George wanted. And then George Wolfe is such an amazing director, and he would direct in terms of sound sometimes. He would direct in terms of music, and I think in terms of music. So he would say, not just to me, he'd say to everybody. So he might say, okay, I want you to walk in that door. I want you to walk in, and then I want it to be like, ba 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 pow. And I'd be like, okay, George, I get it. But I want to walk in and go like, ba 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 pow. And he would say, okay, show me. And so then that might be just the way you, right, Cam? You guys, Cameron Manheim's in the house, by the way. We were both at school at the same time. Cameron will remind everybody, even though she graduated first, I'm older. So I just did it for you, Cam. Okay, I did it for you. But so that bow might be the period, the way that you close the door. Because with George, I might have closed the door, ba 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 bow, like so. But mine might go ba 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 bing. So it's our bodies can play music with the expression on stage. So there was this serendipity of emotion, and there was the craft. And for Pollock, I think I got to throw it back to Ed Harris, because he could pull that performance. Ed would just keep saying to me, just say it. Just say the line. Just say the line. I'd be like, I am saying the line, Ed. I'm just saying the line. And he wanted me to stop acting it. And I had the accent down because I took it home, which is the only way to do an accent. You have to take it home, because otherwise you're just doing the exact words, the proper accent or whatever the accent. But I took it home so I could say all the time, you want coffee, whatever, what do you want on your cereal? The kids would be like, Mom, stop! But I couldn't stop because I had to find the rhythms of it. But then Ed just pulled, so it's the words that you get to say, but it's also the people you say them with. Yeah.
You have a particularly beautiful chapter here about your famous monologue in Angels in America and paralleling it with Alzheimer's and decline and demise. And I won't try to encapsulate it here, but if you don't read this book for any other reason, that and your Academy Award Jewel story are worth it.
Good.
To read the book. Okay.
Hi, Marcia. Another question from the fan bench in the back here.
Hi.
Thank you, first of all, for a beautiful book. You are an amazing writer, and the source of your inspiration could not be more meaningful. We want to see that television program. When can it happen that we have a television program inspired by your mom and her creation and the philosophy that goes with it? I do think there's a huge audience for that kind of a show.
And that's a perfect time to show the picture of your mother in Ikebana with Ikebana. Let's see.
Did we not? Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, that's Mother arranging. Well, that's my friend Vesh Lamai. And Vesh, actually, that makes me laugh, because there was a time that I really was going to do a television show, and it was going to be called I'll Never Get Laid Again. And I was pitching it as a half-hour comedy, which on some level I think you have to treat things this sad with something that people can listen to and watch, and that it will always have a poignant moment. But I was in the middle of what was going to become a divorce. I had my mother come live with us in California for about a month, and she brought her caregiver. So I gave up my king bed to my mother and the caregiver. So I went upstairs to my daughter's room, who was living in a closet because she was a teenager. She was a middle schooler. Cameron remembers this. It was painted black, chalkboard black, with fluorescent stars on it and Nirvana posters on the wall. And then my kids were in like another room, and I was like, I will never get laid again. And then she used to step out of her bed, and I had a little mat down there where she would step on, and it would play music like that, and then some guys from I think it was like they were an a cappella band, a famous a cappella. They said, "We will record Hallelujah for you onto that thing if you ever get laid again." On the little mat. So I was actually going to pitch it as a show, and it was probably too raw, and it just didn't happen. But I do think about what stories in the book could make an interesting show. But also, it's my mom, right? So I have to distance myself from it so that it doesn't feel like I'm holding her up, or I never would want to embarrass her, or would never want to. I would tend to be very careful with it because it's my mother. There's one of my favorite stories, and there's my mother's a driftwood ballerina that talks about my mother pulling out this piece of driftwood from I pulled it out. My dad volunteered me to pull it out, actually, out of the Potomac River. But it's like this whole love story between them, and they go birding, and my dad loved, does anybody bird in this room? Like, it's so gorgeous. You take like binoculars, and you go try to check little birds off on your bird list, and they would go birding in these, bird paths, and Mom would go, "Shh, Thad, look, 12 o'clock. Tufted titmouse." And Dad would go, "Good eye, Beverly, good eye!" And the tufted titmouse would fly away. And Mom would just look at him like, Thad. And then she'd go, "Shh, shh, shh, there it is. Over there, 3 o'clock now. Tufted titmouse." And then he'd haul his camera up, and they'd take a picture of it, and hop back down the aisle, down the path, until Good Eye Beverly happened all over again. So, like, those are the stories in there about them and their beautiful relationship. And it would make a good movie. I mean, I think Lisa Genova did it so beautifully with Still Alice. But this is a little bit. It would be a little bit different. We'll work together on it. Yes.
HGTV is waiting for a birding and garden show from you.
Hi, Marcia. I'm so excited you're going to go talk to Congress. But what I'd like to know is, how did it come about that you are going to be able to do that, and what do you think how are you going to position it when you get there?
That's a great question. I was invited. And I was invited probably because the Alzheimer's Association knows of the book, and they saw me speak at a luncheon. And what they do is they invite people to come tell their story. Now, no one tells it better than Maria Shriver, because she's been advocating for it for years. So she could talk the science of it. She could talk all kinds of things that I would feel embarrassed to pretend like I was the expert on, and they'll have doctors and other people on the panel. Seth Rogen recently told his story because his wife, Lauren's mother, has it, and I found something really poignant in his story. And he was funny, and he spoke maybe for 5 minutes, whereas Maria spoke for 30. And so you do what you can. But Seth talked about it in this really interesting way because it was very personal. He said when he first heard of Alzheimer's, what he thought it was like, they forgot where they put their keys. They forgot, they walked into a room and they went, I can't remember what I walked in here for, or maybe sometimes they even kind of forget who you are. And then when you watch, like, that's the beginning, and maybe it's close to the middle, but then the stillness, I call it an abject loneliness. Your whole tapestry of your life unravels, and your kids can't put it together for you. It's abject loneliness until you forget how to move. And most people die of suffocation because they forget how to swallow, they forget how to breathe. So it's like, it's the most horrible thing. And then he spoke about that just briefly, the education from basic dementia to Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia that was really poignant. So I'll tell my mother's story, and I'll fashion it, I'll write it, I'll tell it, I'll have some facts in there. Probably they'll help coach me, and I'll go do that, tell her story, and hope that it makes a difference. The main thing is that we don't want them to reduce funding for research. That's the main thing.
We have time for 2 more questions.
In this day and age of texting and email, I still write letters. And when I do, when I send a birthday card or a Valentine card, I try to accompany it with a stamp according to the occasion. And I like people to know there is an Alzheimer's stamp. And if you do purchase it, a portion of it does go to Alzheimer's. It also creates an awareness that it is a need. And it's a beautiful, touching stamp of a mother with a hand of a family member on their shoulder to show support. Thank you.
Beautifully said. Thank you. I know about that stamp. I have some as well, and I plan to be posting that on Instagram so more people can know about that as well. And also, when you purchase the book, a portion of the proceeds, the author's proceeds, go to Alzheimer's. So I just want you to know, being in this room, you're part of the cure. So thank you.
And our final question for the evening.
Hi. We talked briefly, and my mother has Alzheimer's. She's about 6 years in. She still has her routines that she can do and things. But I've watched. She was not only my mother, but she was my best friend, and so I'm losing two people. I fall into a morose sometimes, watching her disappear. Also fearing that maybe this will happen to me. How do you stay positive as you watched your mother go through this journey?
I'd be a liar to say I always was. I get sad. I get depressed. I mean, I am a wound licker from way back. And so I did lick my wounds. But I have, my mother would say repurposed pain. I have an amazing sister who is really very faith-based, more than me. And her example, she plows through things just with will and determination. I do have great brothers and sisters, and writing the book was something really helpful. But I would be a liar if I didn't tell you I woke up every day anxious. My mother's the first thing I think about when I wake up, and she's the last thing I think about when I go to sleep every single day. And what I feel is guilt. I feel guilty that I can't take it away from her, that I can't do more, that I can't buy her a mansion or whatever to live in, that we have to save money because we don't know how long she'll live with it, and we have caregivers that I made mistakes that not all the family was happy with. I take it really seriously, and so I do feel anxious. And here's the thing, is you're not alone. You and I are quite similar, and there's a community of people that are similar, and so that's what they say. Exercise, meditate, and there's a lot of people in the world who have a lot of terrible stuff happen to them, and you give back. When Alzheimer's is one terrible thing, there's other people who have other terrible. Are you caregiving for your mom?
I'm my parents didn't need me for the last year and a half, but they just went recently into assisted living 3 weeks ago.
Was it hard?
I'm concerned with their safety.
Was it easier for you or harder for you?
That's hard to say. In one degree it's harder, and in another degree it's easier.
Well, it's the guilt, right? We feel guilty.
For the last 5 years, I'm not doing enough, I can't do enough. And if there's guilt, and then I feel guilt that I'm selfish, I want to go do things on my own.
Right. That's what I guess. I read something, Dr. Hyman has the whole Broken Brain series. There's a really young doctor on it who said, be gentle with yourself. You're doing the best you can. We don't have a roadmap for this, and it's not a great vision. There's tremendous hope. At the Lou Ruva Center with this abracadabra drug, the way the scientists were excited, and when a scientist gets excited about something, you're like, okay, that must, these stoic people being excited about this drug. So there's hope around the corner, but I think everybody in this room is part of the solution, and we must galvanize around it. We just must.
Also, there are terrific books about caregiving. A woman named Connie Goldman, who was an early host of All Things Considered, is now 87, and she wrote a book 25 years ago that's just been reissued. I'll find the name of it for you.
And talk about your podcast, because her podcast is about aging gracefully, and so you're going to be dealing with these issues that you and I are asking about.
Yeah, we all have to keep talking as
Yes.
the big catharsis comes
Yes.
in different forms. Writing has been a
Yes.
catharsis for you. Talking about it is for all of us.
Yes.
Thank you, yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Marcia. Thank you, Lisa Napoli.